So when you hear the word church, what's the first thing that pops into your head? Is it a building? A specific denomination? Or maybe that big worldwide community of all believers? Today, we're going to peel back centuries of meaning to get to the original Greek word behind it all, ekklesia. And, understanding its simple original meaning, well, it might just change how you see everything. And this isn't some minor detail we're digging into. This word, ekklesia, shows up over 100 times in the New Testament. It's the word Jesus used, it's the word the apostles used. It is absolutely central to their entire message. So the big question is, what did a normal person just walking around in the first century actually hear when someone said the word ekklesia? The answer might be a whole lot simpler and honestly more radical than you might think. To find the clearest, most unfiltered definition, we're not going to start with a theological textbook. Nope. We're going to a riot. Yeah, you heard me. The book of Acts, chapter 19, gives us this perfect real-world example of the word in action. Okay, so picture this. The city of Ephesus is in total chaos. A silversmith has kicked up this huge protest against the Apostle Paul and his friends, and the whole city is just in an uproar, rushing into the local theater. And right here is where it gets super interesting. The author, Luke, uses a very specific word to describe this chaotic mob. He says the ekklesia was in confusion. He's calling this angry, confused, pagan crowd an ekklesia. Let's just be really clear about who these people were. They were not followers of Jesus. They weren't, morally upright citizens. They were definitely not there for a prayer meeting. This was an agitated mob. So, if this chaotic, non-Christian crowd can be called an ekklesia, what on earth does that tell us about the word's most basic, fundamental meaning?
It tells us that in ordinary, everyday Greek, ekklesia simply meant an assembly, a gathering of people. That's it. It wasn't some special religious word. It was a normal civic one. It just described a group of people physically gathered together in one place.
So the story ends when the town clerk finally calms everybody down and basically tells them to go home, the gathering's over. But the really key part for us is what this moment reveals about the word itself. This is the whole key right here. When the people were gathered together, the ekklesia existed. The moment they dispersed and went home, the ekklesia ceased to exist. It was gone. The word describes the event of assembling, not the people themselves once they're apart. Now, this meaning wasn't new. The apostles didn't just invent it out of thin air. They were actually tapping into a really rich history that goes all the way back to the Old Testament. See, in the Hebrew scriptures, the word for the assembly of Israel was kahal. So hundreds of years before Jesus, when Jewish scholars translated their scriptures into Greek, what word did they choose to stand in for kahal? You guessed it, they chose ekklesia. So the apostles were intentionally picking up a word that, for Jews, already meant the assembly of God's people. We even see this connection made super explicitly right in the book of Acts. Stephen is talking about the history of Israel, and he looks back at them all gathered at Mount Sinai and calls them the ekklesia in the wilderness. He's using this New Testament word to describe an Old Testament event of a physical gathering. The meaning is just so consistent, an assembly. And this core idea of a physical gathering just continues right on through the New Testament. Whenever the apostles use ekklesia for followers of Jesus, they are always talking about people who are actually physically together. Paul makes this as clear as it can possibly be when he's writing to the believers in Corinth. He says, when you come together as an ekklesia, and then he adds the phrase into one place, just to make sure nobody misses the point. The assembly isn't a metaphor. It's a real event happening in a real space. And the writer of Hebrews echoes the very same idea. He urges believers not to neglect their assembling together. The focus is on the action, the verb of gathering. It's something believers do. So when you put all the pieces together, the pattern is remarkably consistent. In the New Testament, ekklesia always assumes physical presence. It describes a local, spatial gathering. It's an action people take, not just some abstract identity they hold. Okay, at this point you might be thinking, all right, that's a neat language lesson, but so what? Why does this matter so much? Well, the definition of this single word actually has massive implications for church structure, for our practices, and even for our theology. So let's just lock in our baseline here. The foundational, linguistic meaning of ekklesia is an assembly, a physical, local gathering of people, period. And once we establish that, we can also start to see what the word is not. So, what this means is that the word itself doesn't naturally describe a scattered, universal, or invisible body of believers. Now, don't get me wrong, the spiritual unity of all believers is a totally clear biblical teaching. But the specific word the apostles used for their gatherings, ekklesia, referred to the local, physical expression of that unity. I mean, think about it. A word that means assembly can't logically describe a group of people who are physically incapable of assembling. And this definition has real, practical consequences. If the ecclesia is a tangible, physical assembly, then authority is tied to that real, local community, and our practice is about the active verb of gathering. But if it's just an abstract idea, well, authority can become detached from the community, and our involvement can become just a passive identity. It's like a chain reaction. The definition of the word shapes the structure. That structure shapes our practices, and ultimately, our practices shape what we believe. Getting this one word right is truly foundational. So I'll just leave you with this question to think about. What changes for us if we start thinking of church not primarily as a place we go or an identity we possess, but as an action we take, the vital, essential act of assembling together?